Ike Squale, everyone, and welcome to the October 5th Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we're on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation, and our clerk today is Ms. Sheila Gurry. Today's Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192, governing opening meetings during a state of emergency, and the Provincial Health Officer Order regarding mass gathering events. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person, and question period will be suspended throughout the duration of the provincial health orders in effect. First item on the agenda is the introduction of late items.
Thank you, Chair. For late items today at the Governance and Priorities Committee meeting, we have Agenda Item 5F1, we're replacing the Governance and Priorities Committee agenda planning documents. And Agenda Item 6, it's new under correspondence. We're adding correspondence from Dennis McMahon dated September 30th, 2020 regarding arts and culture, and we're reordering the agenda accordingly.
Thank you for that. Are there any other additions to the agenda? Seeing none, motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended. Councillor Mayor Krog, Councillor Emmons, thank you very much. All those in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? Good. Now, thank you. Next, as item number 4 is the adoption of the minutes. We have none, therefore we're moving on to reports, and we're moving all the way down to 5D. I would like to mention that the correspondence that we have regarding in our agenda on the number 6 is referring to some of the conversations that we'll be having in 5D. Welcome, Councillor Thorpe. Welcome. So I would introduce this next item, building communities through arts and culture, will be introduced by Mr. Harding.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Council, this afternoon. I know this has been a while for us to get this governance and priorities meeting on culture, overall culture, but we're very pleased to come do this today. It is quite a big agenda, and so I've given the Chair some timelines that we're trying to get through, because what we want to try and do today is also make sure there's enough time for a lot of discussion. So we structured it in a way that there is a lot of material to go through, but also time for Council to have back and forth discussion. So we've given some timelines there of moving through a number of different reports to go through, and I'll turn this over to Julie really quickly, but before we do that, I think what you'll see today is also to thank Council for restaffing or staffing a cultural section. You'll see with now some of the bandwidth that we have with Ms. Bevan, with our special events coordinator and a new cultural coordinator and other things. We're able to do these types of things, and that's come from Council providing these positions in the last 2 years. So very much thanks to that. And I said it was going to be brief, and so I will. So it's a big agenda. Hopefully we'll be able to have some good discussion, and I'll turn over to Julie, which will guide us through the whole day.
Ike Squale, hello everyone. I'm delighted to introduce Nanaimo's Youth Poet Laureate, Volina Zanetti. She's written a new poem for us today that articulates her vision for the future in response to some of the questions that we're exploring as part of Reimagine Nanaimo. I'd like to welcome Volina. She'll read her poem called The Change I Want to See, and this is the first time sharing it publicly. So come on up, Volina, we're ready.
Hi everyone, thank you for inviting me to be here. And yes, my poem is called The Change I Want to See, and I'll begin. The Harbor City could be so much more if our emissions are cut off at the core. If the town had more trees up and down and old stores weren't left to create ghost towns. If we could walk along the harbor at night without receiving a creepy invite, and if people learned to not get uptight when a person who is wearing revealing clothing is in sight. If we could stop prejudice against folks from across the seas, and if we can stop judging people by the color of their skin, racism shouldn't be. If we could see homelessness as a broken system's greed, funding could be moved to help those humans shine and succeed. If we could see someone and not assume their gender, we can do it. Everyone just needs to work together. If we make these changes in stone, Nanaimo will be beautiful and kind for when my children are grown. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Felina. We'll be sharing that poem on our Instagram later today. Today, members of our culture team and co-presenters from our community are delighted to be here in the heart of downtown Nanaimo on the lands of the Snuneymuxw to talk about our work together to build community through arts and culture and the role that the city plays to amplify and champion local creativity. This presentation is in response to a fall 2019 motion to address arts and culture, and it's a session that's been delayed a couple of times and adapted now to suit our current context with COVID safety protocols, but the time is right to both share some of the projects that we've been working on over the last few months, to talk about ideas for moving forward, and to have some discussion today. There are a few factors that make the time right today. First, as you know, COVID has impacted arts and culture in a big way. Over the last several months, the performances, events, festivals, activities, exhibitions that bring us together and that draw people to Nanaimo, these have been postponed and canceled, and this has jeopardized the economic health and sustainability of our organizations, our businesses, individual livelihoods, and the absence of these activities has impacted our overall wellness. Because of this crisis and other overlapping issues, the arts and culture sector has been challenged, like everybody else, to adapt to new ways of working and connecting, and the sector is rising to the occasion. We'll see examples of that today. The time is right to talk about how the city supports arts and culture because of the shape of our new culture team, which includes expanded experience, and this reorganization and investment enhances our capacity to serve the community, and we're ready to evolve and improve our programs to reach a wider circle of people in Nanaimo and create greater impact. And finally, this process comes as we're in the process to reimagine Nanaimo, to refresh and build our city plans. A cultural plan for a creative Nanaimo was adopted in 2014, and it carries through 2020. Much of it remains relevant. There are many priorities yet to be achieved. So Reimagine Nanaimo comes at a time when we're rethinking and reevaluating so many aspects of our lives and work. It's perfect to be engaging in deep conversations about the kind of future we want to build and about how sustainable community development and cultural development are inextricably linked. And so as we begin, I want to just quickly acknowledge the work of our colleagues on this presentation, Rebecca Buckler, Michelle Dirksen, Allison Collins, and Lynn Wark. And I want to thank our co-presenters, Valina Zanetti, Sonnet Labbé, Bruce Halliday, Carolyn Holmes, and Sophia Maher. I want to thank our colleagues in IT who have been working hard at the Bort Theatre in the city. We can't get together in the same way right now. We can't fill the seats in the auditorium with the diverse people who make art and culture happen, but we've invited some co-presenters and some creative contributions and designed this session to include a variety of voices. We're incorporating music. We'll be showing for the first time a short video with clips by an ensemble from the Vancouver Island Symphony, and Tara Zetto and Jerry Barnum and Tom Neville. And we'll be presenting images that speak to community collaboration and partnership and show off work for Nanaimo by artists that include Brian Faubert, Joel Good and Bracken Hennies Corlett, Elliot Whitehill, Amy Pye, Troy Moth, Crimson Coast Dance, Joël Prévost, and Humanity in Art. And by showing all of these representations of work on this screen today, we're bringing these powerful voices into the room with you. This image on the screen shows a design by Snuneymuxw artist Noel Brown at the new Maffeo Sutton Inclusive Playground. We're covering a number of topics, and as part of each, we'll have time for questions and dialogue. Our next segment is called Nanaimo's Cultural Cornerstones, Collaboration, Leadership, and Community Resilience. My hope is that these co-presenters are somewhere in this building Already today, we've experienced a few technical difficulties. Initially, we were planned to stream live from the stage of the Port Theatre, but we're inviting Bruce Halliday, Carolyn Holmes, and Sophia Maher from the Port Theatre, the Nanaimo Art Gallery, and Nanaimo Museum to join us today. These three represent independent, nonprofit professional arts organizations who co-manage major city-owned cultural facilities. These organizations represent the largest investment in culture on the part of the city, and each of these organizations is known for their work beyond Nanaimo, both across the province and across the country. They attract significant public and private investment here, and they have combined memberships in the thousands. They serve tens of thousands of community members each year in all kinds of different ways. And the work of the Port Theatre, Nanaimo Art Gallery, and Nanaimo Museum underpins and supports a whole ecosystem of social, cultural, and economic activity. And today, together, Bruce, Carolyn, and Sophia are joining to talk about collaboration, how their organizations are positioned as they recover from COVID, and about how their recovery is linked to the recovery of our community. They're just on their way. Sure.
You want to talk from there, and then I'll clean between the speakers.
Thank you.
Who's up first? Sophie? Who's up first? Good, it's all clean for you, and I'll clean after you. Okay.
We're switching off, so.
Yes, that's fine. It's good.
Hello, everyone. Just go for it? Ready to go. I squeal CMCAU. We're going to start our presentation off today by together acknowledging that we are on, and all of our organizations are on, the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. The Snuneymuxw have lived on and been stewards of this land from time immemorial, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to learn from cultural knowledge keepers and to be inspired by Snuneymuxw leadership. We are committed to listening, to elevating voices, to bringing people together for greater understanding, to changing and growing. Siat Snuneymuxw. So we thought we'd take a few moments to introduce our organizations. The Nanaimo Museum is a history museum that explores Nanaimo and District's rich heritage. Our vision is to enhance cultural quality of life, be an anchor in our community, and enlighten visitors through interactive stories, experiences, and exhibits. We also manage programming at the Bastion. We operate the Nanaimo Sports Hall of Fame, a community gallery, a popular walking tour program, and many other year-round offerings. We strive to serve the community as a safe place for interaction, community, collaboration, education, and fun. Carolyn?
I'd squeal. Nanaimo Art Gallery inspires and challenges our community through art. We're a welcoming place all about education, entertainment, creativity, and enjoyment. Through our exhibitions, our programs, our collections, and our events, we explore the boundaries of artistic imagination for and with the people of Nanaimo and beyond. We innovate, collaborate, offer excellence in programming, we preserve a collection, raise the awareness of the importance of art, and we make art stimulating experience for everyone.
Hello. The Port Theatre's long-standing mission is to stimulate and enhance the artistic, cultural, and economic activity of Central Vancouver Island. We have distilled this mission statement down to these 4 words: showing leaderships and building community. Through multiple layers of programming, the Port Theatre works to engage with every sector and every citizen of our amazing community, from attracting some of the top touring artists to creating innumerable community partnerships with performing arts groups and many other non-performing groups. to providing top-level professional services to our youth programs, to our Theatre Angels program, and to hosting over 200 community events each year. Just like our partners, the Nanaimo Museum, the Nanaimo Art Gallery, and the City of Nanaimo, we know that the community benefits through deeper collaboration and the nurturing of creative endeavors.
All right. The City of Nanaimo having governance excellence as one of the key strategic themes for the overall strategic plan resonates with all three of us, as we are responsible for managing city facilities through not-for-profit organizations. Streamlining resources, consistently examining our operations for efficiencies, working with the City Cultural Department, and innovating through internal development and collaborations with each other and other partners are all strategies that we employ in order to leverage our resources to best serve the community. As I'm sure all not-for-profit organizations will agree, cost-effective service delivery is the cornerstone to our success, while ensuring we are also providing supportive, safe, and equitable workplaces for our teams and programming that engages Nanaimo citizens. We are committed to working with the city to ensure that its cultural facilities are well cared for, cost-effective, artistically and culturally relevant. We are all three organizations that have secured multi-year operational funding from the provincial and federal governments to support our ongoing stability. Individually, we are connected with leaders, associations, and organizations specific to our unique industries and are often involved in development, decision-making, and communication within those industries, both regionally, provincially, and nationally. Together, we learn from other municipalities who have supportive relationships between cultural entities, like we do, to learn from their successes and challenges, and to develop best practices as a team. We share spaces, resources, training, ideas, and events regularly. During the ongoing COVID-19 crisis, we have been able to connect with each other to support our development of critical safety policies, share each other's communications with our audiences, develop some shared membership benefits, and provide much-needed moral support. Our industries have been hard hit around the world, and we are managing the current situation through innovation, cooperation, learning and relearning, and continuous attention to the emergent nature of the crisis. We are also looking ahead to 2021 and beyond, planning for new realities and engaging in ongoing conversation about how we can leverage our resources together. A most recent example of this sharing of resources is the beginnings of a new joint marketing strategy. As cultural institutions, we are well positioned to provide support and leadership to the community as we recover from the effects of the pandemic, whether it's through modeling cooperation, supporting learning, or celebrating resilience. The Port Theatre, Nanaimo Art Gallery, and Nanaimo Museum have worked to not only show best practices across our industries, but also to create a culture of excellence within our organizations while taking leadership roles in showing that working collaboratively, cooperatively, and inclusively with all sectors of our community can bring to the City of Nanaimo.
Sorry, you're making this difficult for all of you. All of our organizations believe in the importance of livability and helping make Nanaimo an inclusive, healthy, safe, and desirable place to live. We all engage the local community by offering accessible opportunities to connect with cultural heritage, live performances, and contemporary art. We try to remove any barriers to participation. At the Port Theatre, approximately 2,000 free tickets have been distributed to 80 local service agencies, and they offer $5 tickets to high school students. At the gallery, admission is by donation, and we offer bursaries for teen programs. The Nanaimo Museum keeps their admission prices very low, and entry to the Bastion is by donation, with no one being turned away. We are committed to excellence in school and youth programming and understand the importance of engaging young people in arts and culture. You may be familiar with the Port Theatre's Schools on Stage program, or perhaps you'd watched one of the NDSS annual musicals. There's a good chance your children or your grandchildren have gone on school tours to Nanaimo Museum or have worked with a visiting artist through the gallery's TD Artist in the School programs. We know it's crucial to expose young people to the arts, and we believe this exposure will increase the likelihood of them participating in, valuing, and supporting arts and culture as adults. As someone who's just moved to Nanaimo, I know that these organizations and their programs play a huge role in attracting people to a community. They are essential services that we expect in any thriving city and are cornerstones of a healthy community.
Thank you. I will speak from here. The Port Theatre, the museum, and the art gallery are your arts and culture center and key parts of a vibrant cultural sector. And while we are more often than not caught discussing our community and impact in terms of relevance, SROI, social return on investment, creative innovation, artistic risk-taking, it is undeniable that we also have a direct and indirect economic impact. Between the three of us, we employ 28 full-time employees, 28 part-time employees, and between 40 and 60 casual staff who live here, buy homes, support their families, support local businesses. The drive for best practice and providing excellent facilities allows us to attract and retain some of the best professionals available. Our combined payroll is over $2 million annually. Between the three of us, we offer outstanding, diverse, and inclusive programming and entertainment that is crucial to attracting new and young professionals to our city. We hear it often that we are a key part of the decision-making process when they move to Nanaimo. The theater itself regularly books 300 to 500 hotel rooms a year just for our artists and production staff. Over the past 20 years, the theater has attracted many patrons from outside the regional district. We have sold tickets to over 2,000 households from the Lower Mainland, almost 4,000 separate households from the city of Victoria, over 31,000 households outside the RDN. That represents 299,000 tickets valued at over $6.6 million, and over 71,000 households within the city of Nanaimo and the RDN. Between the three of our organizations, we attract approximately 200,000 patrons and participants annually to the downtown core, eating in restaurants, parking, shopping, and experiencing culture. Between the three of our organizations, we also bring over $510,000 into our community through grants, federal and provincial government grants, and foundations. This is merely a quick insight into the myriad of ways we have positive economic impact. COVID-19 has caused us all to imagine or reimagine our activities, but through innovation and commitment and good stewardship of your facilities, we are well positioned to thrive into the future. We are here to help you grow a healthy community.
Can't remember if you were the last one here or not.
I think I was. It's very clean. We all acknowledge the importance of reconciliation and decolonization and are taking action in our organizations. Through learning opportunities and professional development, we are increasing our understanding of Indigenous ways of knowing and being within our teams. Like so many cultural organizations across Canada, we are working to become aware more of our individual biases and our organizational biases, eliminate racism in our organizations and industries, but we also realize that these industries and organizations are built on colonial foundations. The Port Theatre brings in artists from across the country to share insight into cultures and remind us of the diversity of Canada. They program Indigenous artists from dance companies such as Zante Smith, to well-known international artists such as Susanna Gluekark, to emerging artists like Iskway and Midnight Shine. Nanaimo Art Gallery continues to work with the Nanaimo community to bring people together to learn Halkomenum through art. Our exhibition programs honor diverse experiences and expertise, puts inclusion into action, and amplifies voices that have not always had a space in art museums. For example, our current exhibition is Border X, which features 11 Indigenous artists who skate, and by skate I mean skateboard, surf, and snowboard. We're hosting weekly storytelling tours with Nanaimo artist and storyteller Elliot Whitehill. Each Wednesday at noon, I encourage you to come. The Nanaimo Museum works with Nanaimo and Métis elders and cultural knowledge keepers whenever they're developing new programs and updating exhibitions. The Nanaimo cultural belongings and artifacts housed within the museum collection are held in trust for the nation, and the museum ensures that they're honoring the specifics of the Memorandum of Understanding in their operations. They have a number of very popular school programs to educate children about Nanaimo art and history, and have added Métis history to exhibitions and events, both in the Bastion and in the main galleries. They continue to support local Indigenous artists, as does Nanaimo Art Gallery, through promotion and sales of the artwork in the gift shop. Most recently, Nanaimo Museum has been working on an introduction of a repatriation policy with guidance from Lucy Bell, and they're working with the Good Family and other Coast Salish artists on a feature exhibition examining the revitalization of Coast Salish art on the island. While we're all always trying to become more inclusive and diverse, we need to better understand the realities facing BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, individuals as visitors, attendees, members, employees, artists, and contributors. And while we are making progress, we know that we will make mistakes. We have made mistakes. We will continue to. But as we move forward with diversity and reconciliation efforts, we are going to keep trying, and we're going to keep learning.
I'd like now to thank Mayor Krogh and Council for this opportunity. My great partners, Carolyn and Sophia, and thank you to the city's cultural department, Richard, Lynn, Julie, and all the other staff, Rebecca. We look forward to any questions you have for us at this time.
Hit a button and we'll try it. Go ahead, Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I don't have any questions, but I want to thank you for a very comprehensive review of our top 3 of our culture that we've invested in. And I hope to see more come for arts and culture in Nanaimo. Thank you.
If I push the button, does that turn her off? You want to try it, Councillor Armstrong?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it works. There you go. My question is what is the impact COVID is having on your programs? Do you have a COVID recovery plan, especially going towards the Port Theatre?
I could go first. It has taken us quite a long while to put all the protocols and various equipment in place, and we have just this past weekend reopened, but we're reopened to 50 people maximum, and 50 audience members, performers and staff are beyond that. So it has devastated our revenue. We've gone to virtually zero revenue, you can imagine, from sold out shows. What we have been very fortunate to do is we've taken full advantage of the federal wage subsidy program and some cultural spaces money to put in video streaming. So we are determined at this point to continue operating as we can with our Spotlight series as well, which has separate federal and provincial funding. So to stay relevant and connected to our community. And we're in good shape to carry on all the way through 2021 at this kind of level. And with any good luck, maybe we can get back to some full audiences after that.
Thank you very much. It sounds like you're really working towards keeping people engaged, so appreciate that.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, if I may. Thanks. First of all, welcome and thank you very much to our 3 presenters. Certainly appreciate the efforts that your groups are doing to keep involved and keep our citizens involved in cultural activities during this challenging time. Welcome, Ms. Holmes, to your relatively new position. And Mr. Halliday, great to see you again. It's been a while. And Ms. Mahar, I know you've been working hard at the museum now for a while and getting your feet under the table there. I have a specific question related to the museum. I've had several inquiries, and I have spoken to you about this pre-COVID, and that relates to the Sports Hall of Fame. Can you give our listeners an update? Are there any plans to reactivate that in the near future, or are we waiting until COVID settles down?
Go ahead, Richard.
I was just going to interject on the other two parts of Councillor Armstrong's questions, because I think it would be important to hear how the other two facilities are dealing with their COVID-19 plans, and then maybe they could go into that question, if that's all right.
Certainly.
Okay.
So in general, our COVID recovery, of course, all of our earned revenue has pretty much been reduced to nothing, but we have got stable funding, which is a really good news story. We've shifted our entire focus to prioritizing the most impactful programming we can provide remotely. We're really focused right now on school programming, making sure we can respond to the needs of the teachers who are also managing this situation without being able to come to the museum. So we're putting a lot of work into that. And focusing on other socially distanced ways we can do it. We have to do timed entry at the museum right now, and all of our events, rentals, and that sort of thing have been canceled. But I think it's opened up a lot of opportunities to really examine our operation and focus on new priorities and bring in some training and things like that. So it's been tough, but we're hanging in there. We're doing great. My team's doing an amazing job, and we're very hopeful as we go into the next few years. We think we've got some good stuff going on. For the Sports Hall of Fame, yes, we have talked long and hard about it, obviously with gatherings being not a thing right now, and we don't know how long that's going to go on for. That's been a piece. We're a member of the Canadian Sports Heritage Association, and there's a lot of information coming out right now from all the other Sports Hall of Fames about how they're shifting to an online delivery. So we've shifted our deadlines back a little. We're hoping to do one, the actual induction late next year. We were going to do it in the summer, so we're pushing it back hopefully to November, and we're going to be starting to put out the calls for nominations pretty soon.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I believe Ms. Holmes will come up and give her answer to Councillor Armstrong.
Yes, we closed for a number of months and have reopened and are still on reduced hours. But attendance is quite strong. We are having a bit more problems with our programming because our art lab space is already bursting at the seams and it's quite small. And so we're looking for infrastructure there to expand the space and move some offices from that space to give us more room for programming. With physical distancing, we're limited to about 6 people in our youth programs, in all our programs, which makes it impossible to break even on the programs. So that's a bit of a challenge. We have mask policy in the galleries, and we're trying to negotiate how to have people work and not share office spaces just because it's a small space and we're restricted there. Oh, and I should mention that all our Artists in the School programs have gone online, launched last week, and we're getting some uptake there, so we're excited.
Mayor Krug.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all the presenters today. Mr. Halliday, to some extent, answered the question quite directly, that we can keep the lights on, so to speak, for the rest of, for all of 2021. And that's on the assumption, I'm sure, that the city won't be reducing funding, that we will continue to fund in the way we have. But I guess I want to ask that very specifically with respect to the museum and to the art gallery. Is 2021 a year you can survive, and or is that predicated on the continuance of CERB for the whole period? I realize that's a bit hard to ask, but you know, CERB is going to run out at some point, and that's one of my real concerns, because you have assembled, all of you, I'm well aware, a pretty first-rate team of people, but we do not expect them to volunteer to meet their own mortgage and rent payments. So if you could give me
Yeah, for the museum, currently we are using CERB, but we do have, we've reduced our spending quite a bit, and we are in a stable position for 2021 if the rest of our funding stays stable. So we're in a good position. Once CERB runs out, we can cover our wages. The only place that we may pull back is our temporary, our part-time staff, the temporary part-time that we've added to help us with the gallery of managing the COVID items, but apart from that, we seem to be in pretty good shape.
We are no longer taking advantage of CERB, but have some emergency funding from Canadian Heritage, which is going to help us, and we feel confident that things will be fine with just being cautious over the next year. Thank you.
And if I could just add to, very specifically, at this point, we have not laid off any of our full-time staff. And with the federal wage subsidy going through to June next year, although we don't know the percentage yet, we are budgeting the whole year, and we may have to rely on a bit of the Port Theatre's surplus, accumulated surplus over the years, and we're working to minimize how deep we need to go into that, to reserve the money, keep it on the bookshelf for when we come out of COVID-19, when we need to invest in stimulating work.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any questions, but I do have compliments for all three. So we'll start off with the Port Theatre. Of course, everybody knows that my wife has been heavily involved in Vancouver Island Symphony, and therefore so do I. Today she advised me that she's not up to attending concerts in person anymore, but we ordered the symphony from your sofa. And I did that today, and I have to say that the person I spoke to, whose name I have no idea who it was very helpful and walked me through the process. And so on the 24th, we should be able to watch the 1-hour concert. So thank you to your staff there. I also attended the Border X, okay, on last Wednesday, and I highly recommend it to anybody who has an hour at lunchtime to go and look at it. There's a lot of information that I had no idea about, and it was certainly very informative. And the museum, I guess the one advantage that you have is that you do have a retail operation there as well, which I've been told by some businesses downtown that things are upticking, so I'm hoping that the same is happening with your business. So, and great job you do there. Thank you very much. And don't let Councillor Thorpe push you around too much.
I would never.
No.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. I don't see anybody next in the queue. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add? I would also like to thank all the presenters today. I do have a couple of questions, if I may. In some of the research that I've been working on lately, there's a significant amount of money available through granting streams from the federal governments for urban indigenous organizations and on-reserve organizations. And I'm wondering if all of you or some of you could speak to how have you been reaching out for partnerships to take advantage of some of this funding in the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, I'm aware of those grants. We do need partners when we apply for those grants for certain. We do have some partners that we're working with. The grants that we've been applying for and receiving lately have been through other federal streams that the museum can apply for directly. We're very mindful of the amount of work we're creating for our partner groups when you do an application. So we've been managing to fund our activities with our partner groups through things like the Museums Assistance Program. And we've got some funding from Heritage Canada as well. Does that answer your question?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, Nanaimo Art Gallery is applying for some Vancouver Foundation funding for a 3-year test project, looking at how we move forward with our Indigenous programming position, and also just with the whole organization, how we can change how we do things and do it with a more in a more respectful way, and maybe not how we've always done things just because we've always done them that way. Specifically talking about recognizing our land, not just by words, but in our actions. And so right now, for the last few months, we've just been in a state of reflection and thought, and we're moving forward with that, of course, with our partners. And for the federal grants that you're talking about, I think that we're not working on those right now, partly because, like Sophia says, we're being respectful, but also I think the direction needs to come from the Snuneymuxw people or the Indigenous communities, what they want to do, instead of us thinking what's good for us and assuming that's also in other people's interests. So we're trying to be considerate of that too. Thank you.
And while you're there, if I may, I was going to pop down and ask you the question, but now that you're here, and it's regarding Indigenous, the gallery there. What is involved in having local Indigenous artists do a gallery for a few weeks there? I'm not sure what the term is.
To have an exhibition.
Yeah.
So the gallery is programmed up to 3 years in advance, mainly because of Canada Council and BC Arts Council, and how we have to excuse me, how we have to, in our grants and in our applications, tell what we're going to do and how it's going to tell the story of contemporary Canadian art. Although Jessie Birch, our curator, does include Indigenous artists in many exhibitions, and often local artists as well. So it's more in the way he curates and having invitations that way. He's always making visits to artists in their studios. And so I think if an artist isn't already in dialogue with the art gallery, then to call one of us or drop by. We'd love to start those relationships. And if there's not an exhibition opportunity in the near future, perhaps there's other things. We have some artists in the shop, and there might be other opportunities that way.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Bruce.
If I could, yes. So we get funding and have for the last almost 20 years through the Department of Canadian Heritage to present our Spotlight series. And part of that money is, well, it's all about diversity. It's about gender diversity, geographic diversity, and of course, cultural diversities. And so part of our mandate within the Spotlight series is in fact already to work with Indigenous artists. Right now, it is virtually, not quite impossible, but it's virtually impossible to travel artists. I mean, there's not enough money out there at 50 people to a seat, and often the artists won't travel right now anyway. I think from a local point of view, there is a real opportunity, as we are just proving that we can open and operate successfully in this first fall. I think there'll be many, many more opportunities for local groups of all cultures. And certainly reaching out into the Indigenous community is on our plate, looking ahead. You know, we do have to start with the mandate of the Spotlight series. That's where our funding is. And other federal funding could be seen as double dipping. And those are professional artists, by mandate of the funding. But I think locally there'll be many more opportunities in 2021 as we remain at 50 seats. And we'll be able to incorporate different types of performance than we normally would.
Are you able to, having been on the theater before and been in productions at the Port Theater before, are you able to break even at 50 seats, or?
The answer is no. You know, we wouldn't be existing if it weren't for the city's funding. We wouldn't be managing if it weren't for the federal wage subsidy. To put it in perspective, I think by the time we get to November, we will have qualified and received close to $400,000 worth of wage subsidy. Now, what we're doing with our rental clients, for example, is we are We've reduced the rent greatly because it's only 50 seats, so they don't have revenue either. And we reduced their crew bill by what the wage subsidy is. So we're passing that subsidy directly on to the rental clients. So that's making a show like we just did with Western Edge very possible over the weekend.
I see. Mhm.
But can 50 seats be sustainable? No.
Okay, thank you. Is anybody else?
I've got,
According to Richard's timelines here, we have another 14 minutes to kill.
Don, I got something.
Oh, there you are, Councilor Kesselbach.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Through you to the delegations, I just wanted to say, I'm hearing quite a proactive approach to this whole pandemic and making the best of what opportunities do present. And I'm really grateful just for the leadership that we do have. It hasn't, as a manager and director, it probably has been a huge amount of work to work through all what's been going on, and especially Ms. Holmes stepping into a new role. So thanks a lot for the work. And just I'm hearing a bit on sort of the pivot to being able to provide access through the digital realm. And I'm just curious, in your experiences, are you feeling supported enough with the IT end of things? And also, has there been what has the internet connections and that realm been like? And do we have enough infrastructure, like as a community as a whole, to be able to provide those type of connections to the schools and the community reliably?
I think, as with every other organization and every other individual, it's ongoing learning. Every time we launch something, we think we've figured it out, and then when you put it into practice, sort of like today's meeting, you realize that you have to start again. We think we're set up for our online education for the Artists in the School program, but only time will tell. We're trying to have the artists work with the children remotely, kind of coming into their classroom, but we're also planning to work with artists to record some of the artists so that we can have them on video for schools to download, and that might be easier for some teachers. We're just trying to, I guess, put as much out there as we can. We're also we have been putting some of our family programs online, but I think all arts and cultural organizations are aware that there's an awful lot out in the online, and whether the question is, does there need to be more, and are they really accessing it and getting enough out of it? So it's the tracking now and the being responsive and managing our resources and seeing where we really want to go and put our resources into.
Getting faster than I am.
You're doing very well. I agree with what Carolyn said. I think the other thing that we've done recently is sent out for teachers, for instance. The Art Gallery and Museum have worked together on a survey that's gone out to teachers, so we're not bombarding them with two different ones, actually asking them what they need. So making sure we're doing some outreach to find out what actually, instead of putting all of our resources into something that doesn't meet the needs. So that's been interesting, hearing some of the early responses to that was not what we thought, but it's been very useful. One of the things that surprised us was that there is a greater appetite than we thought for pre-recorded programming as opposed to interacting with someone on Zoom. So with regards to IT, we do our IT ourselves with some support from companies. That seems to be working so far. I agree with Carolyn, we're in a phase of discovery right now, but we're going for it and just going to see how we do. And as we learn, and if we feel that we need to expand what we have and the support we have in the network, we'll look into that.
As for the Port Theatre, I think the technology is not the barrier at all for us, and we've been very fortunate to get some good funding through Cultural Spaces to pay for well over half of our video streaming. We put in a 5-camera system and switcher, and that'll be available for us to use. I think the greater challenge with the digital and online streaming is how to monetize. Because there is so much content, it's like a fire hose coming for free. And so asking people to pay $12 for a streaming in their home is a new thing for people. And so we are testing those waters, and we're going to do it. We're going to stream the Spotlight events, and some of our rental clients will stream as well. Some may choose not to. But we will stream it. To date, we haven't sold more than 30 streaming tickets to any one show. I think I budgeted 50. So monetizing it and turning it into a big revenue source when you can't travel international artists, and of course you couldn't afford an international artist fee. It's the big organizations like the National Arts Centre, who are very well funded, can do a little bit more in that regard. We're aiming at our local audience and telling Nanaimo stories and keeping Nanaimo citizens engaged. And so we will keep building on that, but technology is not the hurdle. Although I would actually say my biggest fear in all of it is not our broadcast ability, but it's everybody's individual receiving technology, because we have no control over that. Some people will be streaming to their big smart TV, going through their home stereo, and it's going to be a very positive experience. Somebody else is going to go through a 10-year-old iPad, and it's not going to look so good. So quality and the fact that anything on a flat screen is not live. It is not the same connection from audience to performer. So.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. I think everyone, well, first of all, thank you. What a great presentation and rich dialogue. I think everyone in this room is really aware that there is a community chat happening, or a conversation around supporting community arts. And this is often framed in the way of a specific home for community arts. And I'm wondering if I can have comment from anyone regarding these new evolutions that our cultural institutions are going through, and whether that will create any space for opportunities for community artists to show, display, create, etc., using the infrastructure that we currently have.
Just because I've been here 2 months now, I have been meeting with local artists and local some groups. And so I do know the concerns you're talking about. Right now, Nanaimo Art Gallery is in a rather small space and is fully programmed and sort of bursting at the seams. So what we have now is quite limited. I think as we move forward and we look to having a feasibility study to expanding the gallery and seeing about building a new gallery, there's so much potential there, and there's so much more we could do. And of course, as we plan, we'll be including all the local community, also local artists, in what this space might look like and how it can meet everybody's needs. Does that answer your question?
As I sort of alluded to earlier, this 50-seat limitation, while it takes away a lot of opportunities for us, and most of we've been at an activity level of 300 shows a year. So now we're at, this fall, we're doing 16 over 4 months. But we have not been soliciting small groups to come and use. We just need to open and prove we can do it safely, and that we can edge the community, the audiences back in, even at 50 people. I really believe that come 2021, and maybe before, once we prove we can do this safely, that we will be soliciting groups to come and use us as best they can. Of course, it's an 800-seat theater, and plunking 50 people down and even having to social distance on the stage is very limiting, and not every group, even if it's almost free, not every group would want it. It's a big room. So, I mean, one of the things I really believe is, boy, do we ever see now why we needed the studio theater? You know, but there you go. I think there's a natural evolution, and as we get back, I can't imagine getting back to 300 events in short order. I mean, it took years to build it to that, and I can't actually imagine commercial artists touring maybe ever as freely as they used to. International borders, different country rules, I think that's going to be a long time. So I think there's real opportunity once we start getting some full houses in there that create revenue, then we will be able to nurture more local groups. Yeah, more community groups. I mean, we're certainly determined not to sit vacant.
We're a little different given that we are a community museum, so our whole focus is on pretty much on community and our city. Certainly this pandemic has focused us in on community. I think it's almost a maniacal focus on community right now, in that we are here together, we have been locked in, we are, doing our best, and we're seeing a lot of resilience. And so that's exciting us at the museum, is being able to share those stories of resilience. So certainly we have taken out for next year, because of COVID restrictions, our major exhibits, and are looking at how we can redo things in the museum next year. And it's all about engaging community. How can we reach out to the community, help get them involved in what we exhibit in that feature space. We've got an idea, we've got a plan. And we work with a number of Indigenous artists, Snuneymuxw and other nations in our gift store, and we've prioritized making sure that any buying that we're doing is coming in those areas to support the local artists. And beautifully, the biggest demand we have in our gift store right now is by far the Indigenous artwork, which is really exciting for us because it means we're continuing to be able to communicate with those artists and buy the art, and so that's been really exciting as well. People from Vancouver and other places are calling in and ordering artwork now, which is really exciting. So yes, I think that our focus in this next year at the museum is definitely going to be on community, how we can support the community. We're really looking at a lot of collaboration and making sure that we're having meaningful relationships with the community. Also learning, I think we have a lot of learning to do at the museum, so we're looking forward to doing that with the community as well.
Thank you, Councillor Emmons. We're almost out of time in terms of this section. I would like to remind everybody, if they are down at the museum, I think some of my work is down there as well. Yeah, so I appreciate that. And I know, absolutely. And, but I would like to, another plug is these are the very professional organizations, cultural organizations live in our city. We do have many, many other organizations, the not-for-profits, the various amateur organizations and semi-professional organizations that are hurting just as much, if not more. Many of the times they don't have access to the type of grants that we have. And so I would, whenever we do have an opportunity to get back up, is to help out those organizations and frequent them as much as we can. And with that, would remind everybody who probably don't know, I've spent a lot of time in theater, on stage with Sophie, both on stage, backstage, and in the booth working. So it was an opportunity, and look what happened to us. I'm a politician now, she's running a museum. So support your local art groups, you never know what's gonna happen. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Bruce, Carolyn, and Sophie, for your presentations today, and I would thank you all for coming and taking the time to be here. And I believe, Julie, you're up next.
Thanks, Sophia, Bruce, and Carolyn. Models of adaptability, they were all set up to go on the stage of the Port Theatre and then buzzed on over here to be with us, so thank you very much. Next, we're going to talk about the culture programs that the city delivers directly and how we're looking at evolving these programs to increase their impact. We're going to look at city investment in culture, updates on our Poet Laureate programs, and share a story about how the city has been creative and responsive during COVID. So providing grant funding to Nanaimo-based nonprofit organizations is at the core of how the city supports arts and culture. I'm just going to offer a snapshot of how the 3 streams of grant funds administered through culture currently work. Then over to you for dialogue and questions related to this and to the report in front of you. On the screen is one of 3 murals commissioned this year as part of Hub City Walls. This image is by Austin Weflin, and Hub City Walls was funded through one of our grant programs. Currently, we're accepting applications to support 2021 programs, and all of the guidelines and application forms are live on our website, and our staff has been connecting with groups to answer their questions and discuss their applications in advance of the October 19th deadline. So culture and heritage operating grants, these grants contribute a portion of operating expenses to established nonprofit cultural organizations, those who provide ongoing programs and services and who are woven into the fabric of community life. These grants fund core expenses like portions of staff costs, for example. Last year, we received 25 applications for this fund. The total request amount was over $440,000, and 23 applications were funded. Currently, there are 5 groups receiving 3-year operating support through this fund, which means that they report annually, but they only apply every 3 years. And these include Western Edge Theatre, Theatre One, Vancouver Island Symphony, Crimson Coast Dance, and the Nanaimo Conservatory of Music. These grants are crucial to long-standing arts organizations who create jobs, create accessible events and activities and opportunities for learning. And organizations, as we know, leverage these funds to access other kinds of funding. The allocation of program funds is calculated based on population, and currently it's at $3 per capita. Culture and Heritage Project grants, these support one-time or recurring cultural initiatives. For 2021, there's $44,407 allocated to this program. When the culture plan was approved in early 2014, Council voted to increase this fund by 10% for 5 years, and so the last year of this increase was 2019. The pot of money remains at the same level. Last year, 20 applications were received, and the total request amount was over $120,000. 17 projects were funded. And one of the key reflections on this current program is that demand has gone up significantly, reflecting the corresponding growth in our community, and currently this program is oversubscribed. And the third stream is the Downtown Event Revitalization Fund. It's currently $150 for 2021. It was established in 2017 to support events and initiatives that attract residents to downtown Nanaimo, to support its vibrancy and stimulate business activity downtown. These grants are intended to serve as an incentive to organizers to enhance and improve their events. So last year, there were 25 applications received. The total request was over $241,000. 24 projects were funded, and these grants really vary in size. The smallest last year was $450. The largest was $24,750. So there's quite a range. So members of council have in front of you a report that recommends a grant review process be undertaken by staff to examine a number of issues related to the city's culture grants. Some of the issues that warrant research and engagement include how other public funders have shifted to address issues of equity, accessibility, and diversity. We want to look at eligibility requirements, assessment criteria, and budget requirements for applicants. We want to investigate how reporting requirements can both provide appropriate information without becoming onerous for small organizations. We want to examine models of assessment and how public funders are addressing the issue of compensation for peer assessment labor and how these panels are appointed. Our staff team is well positioned for this work. We have team members now that have professional expertise in nonprofit governance, grant writing and reporting, and experience convening and participating in grant adjudication panels at municipal, provincial, and federal levels. So the recommendation in front of you is that council endorse a review of these 3 grant funding programs administered by Culture and Events. And so I'd like to turn it over to you for any questions or comments.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. One of my questions is, I noticed there's nothing about community engagement. When we saw the last group go up, there was a lot of, obviously, concerns from many community members, and I heard from numerous people that they would like to have some input into what goes up. You know, I realize that people want peer reviewed as well, but is there not a way where you could have 3 that go up from peer review and then 3 that go up from city engagement through Facebook or whatever, where people can vote? Because it is their money. And that's what I heard from a lot of people. It's our money, and we have no say of what type of art's going up in our community, and we would like to have some say. So I would like part of your review to include that. Like, where is the community in this? Who would like to have a say in what community art goes up? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, a large part of this review will be to look at how these grants are currently adjudicated and all of the processes surrounding that. And we'll look to models, best practice in other communities. We know that in some communities, these decisions are made solely by municipal committees, staff committees, interdepartmental, and in other places there are peer assessors that are hired or volunteer to participate. So we want to gather up that information and come back to you with some recommendations about how to improve this process.
But that still doesn't address community engagement, which I think is critical for this, because it is their dollars. And they're asking, I don't know if other councillors said it, but I know it was on many, many Facebook sites, why isn't the community being engaged in the selection process? Not necessarily for some grants, but especially for those that are going in Mafio Sutton Park or murals and something. They're asking for it, and everybody ran on the platform of community engagement, yet we're not engaging our community on this, which is a huge thing for them. So that's something that I'm actually pretty passionate about, because I bet you I had at least 30 calls on that, and then there was lots of comments on the different Facebook sites on that as well. So again, I just go back to it is taxpayers' dollars, and they're asking for a say in what goes up in their city, and I think that's a fair thing from my perspective.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. And just to put this on the table for discussion, I would actually like to move the recommendation that the Governance and Priorities Committee direct council to endorse a review of 3 grant funding programs administered by Culture and Events, including research on best practices and dialogue with community stakeholders, and return with recommendations to improve and evolve processes to continue to meet the needs of the Nanaimo cultural community.
Seconded by Councillor Gusselbrock. Do you wish to speak to it?
I think it's fairly straightforward. I think it can include some of what Councillor Armstrong's in the review. This is an opportunity for us during COVID to reimagine and reinvent and look at the way we do things, and I like the idea of more diversity, and let's see what recommendations come out of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Croak.
Thank you very much, Chair Bonner. I'm feeling somewhat provocative today, so I'm going to start off by being provocative. I appreciate the comments of Councillor Armstrong around what she's hearing on Facebook and the various sites, etc. But my personal view has always been real engagement means you actually extend your fingers on your keyboard enough to send an email to mayor and council and or city officials to raise your position, as opposed to the chatter that goes back and forth in the ether of the world, where so much of the exchange to me seems to be based in no solid factual grounds, but simply on opinion and rhetoric. And so my real question to Ms. Bevan, who's doing a marvelous job, and I think you were one of the city's very good hires in the last year. Compliments to CEO Rudolph and those who participated in the process. Are you getting, or have we received, in any significant way, comment from the community that the present process is not satisfactory or not meeting the needs of the community or not reflecting the community's cultural desires? In other words, are we a solution in search of a problem? I'm going to vote for the motion. I want to be clear about that. But what I want to know is this an issue, a real issue, or is this a response to a few comments from a few people?
I think that this, the process to look at grants, I think it's an appropriate time. The last review was undertaken in 2014 by Melinda Molyneux, and things have changed over the last 5 years. So I think it's I can't speak to comments that other people may have received about this, but I know over the past few years, the process around adjudication has changed a couple of different times. And so this will be an opportunity to gather up feedback and really look at how other municipalities are undertaking this important work and design something here that our staff team and you can feel comfortable with, and also that is transparent and people in the community feel works for them.
So if I may, through the chair, you yourself in your position, I take it, have not received a great deal of public comment on this. And by I mean simply people writing to the city or emails being passed on from mayor and council or anyone else.
I have had a few conversations with people about undertaking this work and the value of really looking at how grants are evaluated and looking at assessment criteria and ensuring that our processes are honoring diversity and our processes are not overly onerous. You know, when a group is applying for $450, we don't want them to have to put 500 hours of staff or volunteer time into reporting requirements. So looking at finding what the right balance is.
If I may, Mr. Chair, just one more comment to close here. I just want to say I will be voting for the motion as indicated, but I must say I think it reflects also a compliment to Mr. Harding and his shop that there doesn't appear to be a great deal of significant public comment other than in Facebook around the existing process, but I'm certainly going to support the review. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm supporting the motion and I'm happy to do so. My read of it is that what you're asking is for us to undertake a review of the 2014 process and model to see if it still fits. And within that review, you will be considering things like public engagement and stakeholder engagement. Is that accurate?
That's correct. The review will include community input.
Wonderful. And I also think, if I may, just a final comment, I think we observed from a mural downtown that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. With that said, I think there is an interesting concept coming from Councillor Armstrong. I believe that we hire cultural managers to do this work for us, who have that wisdom and that experience, and I am perfectly happy with that. But I am kind of curious about maybe if we could put one out for a community vote. It's an interesting opportunity for the community to feel like they're engaged in that process. So just a comment, but I'm happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, just a couple of comments, and maybe a question that Mr. Harding might be prepared to answer. I think one thing that springs to my mind through Councillor Armstrong's comments are that we used to have public participation and direct involvement through the Culture and Heritage Committee, which of course involved members of the public, which were appointed to that committee. And I always felt that was a pretty good model. And that is a conversation I've indicated I want council to have at some point in the future. But to Mr. Harding, and Ms. Bevan has referenced this, our current policy for evaluation and so on is about 5, maybe 6 years old. And I remember that was a lengthy process to revise our procedures for grant applications for culture and heritage. And it seems to me that a lot of work went into that to make the process simpler, to make it more transparent, to make the guidelines very clear, to try and be fair, to build in accountability. And I'm wondering your perspective, Mr. Harding, are we already feeling the need to revise that? To me, it's something that we just barely did.
That's right.
Go ahead, I think.
Right, just wanted just a little bit of housekeeping. So this is, again, just on the operating grants. We have 2 other reports coming to you on public art processes. So just wanted to make sure that I'll get you.
That's not how it reads.
Some of the public art that's coming in.
Project grants is referenced in this report as well.
It will be in there, but again, the whole public art aspect review is also going to come up on the next little bit. But so going back to the aspect, Councillor Thorpe's absolutely right. The criteria is really strong. However, when the Culture Committee was no more, and then if Councillor Thorpe remembers, there used to be the Culture Committee would then have a subcommittee that would spend months looking at grants. Those don't exist anymore. So now it's for the last few years, it's just been staff.
Right.
And so what we have heard, and I've heard, and Ms. Bevan hasn't been here as long, is concerns that it's staff-driven review using the criteria, which is still very strong, like the criteria is strong. And so what we're suggesting here is just, let's go look at some best practices that are out there. There's a number of other things on, not so much the criteria maybe, but more who is reviewing. And so it's, when it does come to council for final review, council knows that it's gone through maybe a different peer review aspect and other concept, that it's not just a staff review. However, we may come back and say, one of the best practices is keep the criteria strong, and it is a staff review, and it's a council decision at the end. So the idea here is we have the new culture section now. It's a chance for us to, dust off and just make sure what we're doing is the most up to date and current practices of dealing with these, which are very key to a lot of organizations. If that helps.
Yes, it does. I appreciate that summary, and I think it's reflective of how I would view things as well over the past several years. So I'm all in favor of reviewing policies and practices. I'm always in favor of examining best practice if we can identify that. And I think in this case there is certainly room for some type of either council or public involvement in some of the things that we're talking about connected to this. So I will be supporting the motion, but I just wanted to be clear on your thoughts on why it was necessary, and I think that component of it is. We have relegated or delegated this to staff over the past several years, and I think maybe that's not totally fair on staff either. Council needs to take more direct ownership of this and maybe involve the public a little bit more too. I'm not saying we need a referendum on every piece of art that we're considering, but some type of public involvement. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have Councillor Armstrong up next.
I just have to rebut the mayor there.
Go ahead.
We had hundreds of emails on that piece of art, so to say that people aren't concerned about process, to me, is incorrect, because we did get hundreds of emails, majority in favor of the piece, but others against it. So people were invested in it. So I do think that the community is very much invested in how we get there. Thank you.
Now, the next person I have is Councillor Brown, and I know he's not here.
Oh, that was me, sorry.
That must be you? Okay. Councillor Martman.
Just in response, just to be clear, yes, we did get a numerous amount, probably the most emails we've had on any topic was on that particular mural. But it wasn't about community process, it was just about they didn't like it. It wasn't necessarily that the majority of people said they wanted to be involved. So just clarifying that.
That is process.
Thank you. All done? Yes. Okay. I have a couple of questions, if I may. Now, unfortunately, I don't have all the reports in front of me because this is kind of a weird job for me today. So, you mentioned a $3 per capita contribution to the arts. Does that include the permissive tax exemptions that we also give out to the Arts Committee?
No, it does not.
So in this review, I think it would be nice or a good idea to incorporate that somehow as well into this per capita, because one of the things I'd like to know is how do we shape up with other municipalities across BC in terms of our per capita money that we do donate to the arts. I'm thinking it's probably not high as it should be. So if that's as part of that review would be the great. I agree with Councillor Thorpe that I think involving the public more in some of these decisions. Most of these grants were always done by various committees, and I think that that helps with more of the transparency, because then people can apply to be on these committees, and if they don't like it, they can move on to a different committee. And to some of the earlier conversations we had about committees, these are kind of, kindergartens for, people becoming more involved in our city, right up to the level of mayor. I'm definitely in support of the motion going forward. And when it comes to us, I also noted that we're also doing some work in Reimagine Nanaimo on arts and culture. Are those two related, or how are those two, how are they working together?
I'm going to speak to that a little bit later on in terms of how we're engaging the arts and culture community.
I will wait then. Mr. Hardy, you were brown today.
I am. So just if council wants us to look at funding comparisons, that would be a separate motion. We weren't planning to do the funding comparisons in this process. It's really to look at selection process and review process. So I would say if council wants us to come back on the same with comparisons of funding, that would be I think that would be a separate motion.
Okay, and that raises another question then. So is this a very narrow review then? Are we looking at how all of this work is done in the fact that we're in the midst of a pandemic now and things may be carrying on as they are? Or is it just the review of how it's reviewed, how it's chosen?
It's a little bit broader than looking only at the adjudication process. I think based on what's been described in the report here, we could potentially include how other cities allocate funding to grant programs. I think that would be within the scope here. So we're looking at a number of issues and gathering information, not only on who decides, but all of the process around it, even including issues related to how organizations could best submit their applications, thinking about accessibility and some of the work that we've seen by other public funders. So it could be broader.
Okay, I can live with that.
Okay. It just if I could, sometimes it's a little bit of apples and oranges when we look at the funding envelopes, because we have to include a much more, like you say, permissive tax exemption. Are there in city buildings? Are there other granting things that we do? So, and these are separate ones. So I just didn't want to set up expectations that we'd have a complete financial review of it. But definitely, what are the cities, how they're allocating.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gusbrook.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Through you.
Actually not on here at all.
Me?
Can somebody light him up and try this one? How's that?
I think that worked.
There you go. You're in between.
Just with the review, there's a list of values that we have articulated in our council strategic plan, but I'd just be curious, just for the values by which we're building these and reviewing our systems by, to be really clearly articulated, out front of the process, so that we can look to see if alignment of just sort of how people are accessing the grants, who's choosing the grants, what the process of what are we giving grants to, is aligned with, these core values of what we're trying to achieve. And I think that they're clearly articulated, in the cultural plan, but I think just reviewing that so that we can see that, is this the list that we want to build our city by and our arts and culture program by? So, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Bevan or Mr. Harding. So I'm struggling a bit with the motion as to how far it drills down. And I guess I get the part that we need to look at determining what dollars go into, say, public art. But where I'm struggling with is does that also include then determining within, assuming we give $50,000 to public art, that we're going to have that same committee look at the individual applications, or is that would be another group that would be doing that? I know I sound confused, but that's because I am.
To answer your question, this proposed review is just on the 3 funding streams that come through culture. So public art is not within, really, within these 3 streams. There was one occasion this year where there was a festival funded that included public art, but these include everything from funding for the bathtub races and Dragon Boat to the symphony to Western Edge Theater. So it's a really broad range of activity.
So if I could follow up, so we're not, for example, with the symphony, we're not determining that the program they offer is somehow have to be approved by a committee. Thank you.
No.
Councillor Hemmons, you just unbuttoned yourself. Okay. We have no more speakers, so does anybody need the motion reread? No. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that is passed. Item 4, art in public spaces.
There are just a couple more items in this segment that I want to highlight for you. Just wanted to provide a brief update on our Poet Laureate program. On the screen, this is an image from a previous year with Poet Laureate Tina Biello. And though, of course, we have Volina Zanetti in the youth role, currently our other position is vacant. Even though the city invited applications over an extended period of time, our team has sought feedback and insight from members of the literary community, and we heard a couple of different things. This program has immense value. The 2 poets who have held this title in past years put a lot of heart into it and went above and beyond. We have heard that the honorarium for the Poet Laureate isn't reflective of the amount of labor involved, and it doesn't reflect the value and the impact of this work in our community. But we know that we have willing collaborators. Literacy Central Vancouver Island is one, and there are others. So this is another program that I just wanted to provide an update that we're reassessing to look at how we can make it more flexible, more inclusive for local talent. One idea is to shift to a writer in residence. So we'll return to you at a future date to provide some updates on the shape of this program, but I wanted to raise it here as something we're actively thinking and talking through. And next, I just want to highlight an example of how we've been able to adapt to changing circumstances in 2020. And we're going to share a 4-minute video that highlights our Concerts in the Parking Lot series from this summer. Roll it.
Through the Concerts in the Parking Lot series, the City of Nanaimo provides uplifting music to seniors, creating memorable experiences, supporting musicians through the power of music. Our first Concert in the Parking Lot performance is brought to you by Vancouver Island Symphony, performing at Origin at Longwood. wonderful opportunity to bring music to where seniors reside and support musicians through the joy of music. Up next is Terrazetto at Kiwanis Village, Nanaimo. Our final performance by Jerry Barnum and Tom Neville is at Chartwell Malaspina.
Ain't trying to tell you what you gotta do, just tell you what I do in mine. I just want to savor love, yeah, when you come on down. I just want to savor love when you come on down. Just wanna savor love. Just wanna savor love.
We hope you enjoyed the music as much as we did this summer. The performers were amazing. In addition to these amazing performers, Trish and Jeff Horrocks performed at Lakeside Gardens, and Trevor Price performed at the Nanaimo Seniors Village.
This is a project that our colleague Michelle Dirksen took on with a lot of enthusiasm this summer, and we adapted the city's Concerts in the Park series, which typically happens at Maffeo Sutton Park and Bowen Park Amphitheater, to bring live performance to 5 seniors' residences around town. We had a lot of positive feedback on it from both musicians that were hired to participate and from seniors, so we wanted to share that with you today. We're going to launch in to talk about art in public spaces. This is a photo of a work by Brian Faubert. It's newly installed across from the Port Theatre. It's part of our 2020 program, and I'm just going to share some images of the projects we've undertaken so far this year. This work will be in place for the year. This is the art project for Harewood Skate Park by Joel Good and Brackenhenny's Corlett in collaboration with Nanaimo Art Gallery. The Hulkaminam word hyenimus was just added to the skate park in paint a couple of weeks ago, and we're now working on a short film with a production company to create a video portrait of the communities that surround the skate park and the people who work together to realize this big dream for Harewood. These are our 2020 street banners by Amy Pye. This was a project done in collaboration with Rotary Clubs of Nanaimo. It's a beautiful design that represents their areas of work and their 100 years of service locally. This is One Song Staircase by Humanity and Art with Tina Biello. It's a colorful, poetic response to the way that our community is experiencing the pandemic. And this is a temporary intervention downtown on Wharf Street. We have a new suite of murals and banners for Bevan Pool by Elliot Whitehill. This project is very significant, both in terms of its scope and scale, and also in terms of the way it communicates Nanaimo values, stories, language, and connection to this land. Painting of the last mural just wrapped up on Saturday morning, and the banners are going up shortly, and I really look forward to standing together with you to see this work in person. This single slide doesn't really capture it. It will impress you, and it will be a beautiful new layer of storytelling at the pool. We have fun, playful outdoor sculpture. This is Name Your Dog by Joël Prévost. Joël is an artist who runs Vancouver Island Sculpting Studio. He offers classes and exhibits work by local artists as part of his business. This is a great spot for photos, and this is darling Fiona. She was one of the first people to pose with this pup. In response to requests from the community this year, we've taken the art program beyond Maffeo Sutton Park. This is a sculpture by Troy Moth in the Old City Quarter, and in this image, the work is being activated by a dance performance called Lifeline for Overdose Awareness Day. It was presented by Crimson Coast Dance alongside the Nanaimo Community Action Team with Holly Bright and Genevieve Johnson. And so you have two reports related to public art, a proposal for an art in public spaces working group, as well as an update on the RFP for permanent art at Maffeo Sutton Park. Both of these raise a number of issues. So at this point, I'd like to invite questions about these projects that I've shown here, or anything that's in the two reports related to public art.
Thank you. First up, Mayor Krogh, that's right.
Thank you very much for the presentation. You're a hell of a salesperson. I must say, I want to offer this comment, though. If the honorarium is seen as too low for our poet laureate, then we should find the money to up it. I'm a huge fan of all the poet laureates this city has had, and the young ones as well. And I must say, given that it's the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, Jerry Barnum's father, his uncle Wallace, both served, as well as an older brother who perished in the fight against fascism. So Jerry Barnum it always rings a little note of sentiment with Councillor Martin and myself, who attended high school with him. So I think this is marvelous. I think the program to have music out in the community is a wonderful thing. I personally, if we find the money, I wouldn't limit it, with great respect, and I understand why, of course, just to seniors' residences. I think anywhere this kind of thing pops up would be so appreciated by the community. I can tell a little sentimental story. I was wandering through the streets of Assisi on our 35th wedding anniversary. Sharon was not feeling that well, and I wandered the dark streets that night, and you could listen to the people chatting in their houses and the TV going, and I started to hear music. And I followed the little cobbled streets till I came to this lovely church, filled with all the locals and a few tourists like myself, and this lovely little orchestra up at the front of the church, just playing on a September evening. And I must tell you, it was one of the most moving experiences of my life. I will never forget that moment. And I can't help but think that if we put some more money into this, we might create some wonderful moving experiences for a whole bunch of other people who will just discover music somewhere in this lovely city. So compliments, compliments. I encourage more of this.
Thank you. I believe our worship just applied for the poet laureate position. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Ms. Bevan or Mr. Harding, who actually owns the rights to the materials that are written by the poet laureate? Does the city retain the rights to the material, or does the author?
Poets and artists would retain copyright of their work as the creators, and we would pay them a fee to be able to use it.
Perfect. Thank
and
you.
enter it into agreement.
Thanks.
Councillor Gusselbrock, which I think is this one.
Thank you, Chair. Definitely would like to echo the comments made by Mayor Krogh. My grandmother was actually at Origins and had dementia, and the only thing that would calm her down was classical music. So it was kind of moving to see that, and I think that yeah, being able to utilize our public spaces and support artists and have more musics like that, it would be a lovely thing to have expanded in our community. I think the public art, I think it's a huge addition to our community and really enhances all aspects. And I think I would really like to see more and that expanded as the trajectory looks like it's going, and to remove barriers in terms of the production of it. Because I think sometimes too much process can get in the way of getting it out there. And I think that there's such a diversity in art, just the more of it out there is going to be better. I really like the recommendations that you put forward, and I look forward to seeing sort of these processes further articulated and presented back to the GPC. So thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Thank you. I see that there's actually a recommendation here that I'm not moving it right now. I've got some questions around it because it's about directing council to endorse the creation of an art and public spaces working group to be facilitated by culture and events staff. So is this arts and public spaces working group, I'm assuming, is strictly, it would be a mandated to only reviewing or looking at the way our art and public spaces works, or what would the working group do?
Yeah, I think the idea behind the Public Art Working Group would be to bring a group of local people together with different expertise and leverage their expertise to make our program stronger. So we have issues to deal with related to conservation and maintenance, engineering, all of these other issues. We know that we have lots of people in the community interested in this topic. And in the past, we've drawn together groups, most recently for a temporary, one project review panel. But the idea here is that we would have a more cohesive trajectory by working with the same group over the course of a longer period to explore some of these ideas more fully, and looking ahead to updating our practices and policies with regard to public art.
Thank you. If I may. Sure. And I think it might come up more in the Reimagine presentation you're going to do, because one of the things that has been brought about by the community is a lack of space for local artists and perhaps a community arts and culture community building as other smaller communities actually have. And would that be something that this group would be reviewing or looking at, or is that something more in Reimagine Nanaimo?
That isn't an issue. The issue of space and facilities is not an issue that we thought would be one that would be tackled by this working group. Right. They would really be looking at, we'd be engaging their expertise on items like interpretation, education, how to update our public art inventory, they would inform how we're developing RFPs and expressions of interest for artists. So it would really be around public art, not the issue of facilities.
Okay, thank you. Can I assume that space might be in the Reimagine? Yes.
We're going to touch on that briefly.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. Just to get it on the table then, I'll move the recommendation that council endorse the creation of an art and public spaces working group to be facilitated by culture and events staff.
Seconded by Councillor Gesselbrock. I would ask, are we in that part of the meeting at this point?
Oh, we're not? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes, Chair. I believe Ms. Bevan did introduce the next two.
Two together.
Yes, she did. She did talk about the next two reports.
Thank you. Okay.
Which is fine, because I did have some questions on the first one, but let's carry on with this one first.
I moved it, and I believe that this would be a good working group for us to have, and yeah.
Okay. Question, Councillor Armstrong.
I have a concern with this because I think if we're going to go down this route, we should be going back to committee structure then, because now we're having staff that's picking our working groups. I think it's something that belongs with the council to do that. I also think is basically doing the job of a committee. So I think it's, I echo the words that Councillor Thorpe said. That was a very active committee, did a lot of good work, and I think it's one that we need to put back to the table, because basically all this is doing is creating another one under a different name of Working Task Force, of which now Council doesn't have any control. So I believe we need to seriously look at the committee structure for that. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I have some concerns about this too. It just seems too specific for me. I think it is part of a larger conversation about committees, and I could see this as a subcommittee of a cultural group with public participation. So I need more information and more rationale before I'm inclined to support this at this time. Thanks.
Mr. Harding.
I just wanted to just some clarification that what we're asking is that we would, for staff to go and create the criteria for such a group, and that would still have to come back to council for approval and also selection. So we would be coming back to you with the criteria of what this group would look like for dealing with public art, and then come again once we have that endorsed, then we'd go out for how do you populate that group, if that helps.
Okay. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with the comments on the committee and that this used to rest with a different body. However, I'm going to support it because I feel like we, as a city, hired a real cultural leader in our community to help us drive this file of work. And after 6 months on the job and a thorough review is coming to us with recommendations to adapt our program to be more responsive to the arts community. And so as a councillor, I feel that we should be supporting those efforts. I think we do need examination of our committee structure, and that we've flagged that, and I anticipate that will be coming to council, but I would hate to see good work put on hold because we need to do more thinking about the process. I really think we have a leader here who's trying to lead us, and I'd like to listen. Thank you.
I don't see anybody else in the queue. Oh, yes, I do.
If I may, Chair, thank you. And I appreciate the words of Councillor Hemmons, and I don't disagree with her on that at all. I'm just feeling some discomfort that we're putting, what's the expression, the tail before the horse, and we're cart before the horse. Thank you. Let's pin the tail on the donkey, and I'll be the donkey. I just feel that we're approaching this sort of in an ad hoc way, and we're talking about forming this one, call it subcommittee or working group. We could apply the same reasoning to any other topic in the city, whether it's examining crosswalks or speed zones or whatever, topic you feel is important. So for that reason, I'm uncomfortable with doing it for this specific topic before we have a more general discussion. But Councillor Hemmons' points are well taken, so I'm still debating within myself.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you. So to further understand, which is why I asked the question earlier, what would be the mandate? What's exactly the purpose? It's fairly narrow. It's dealing with the topic of art in public spaces. And we've just heard earlier how community would like input, and this is part of community. This is strictly endorsing the creation. It's not actually creating it. It's, if I understand correctly, it's going to give us a framework which will come back to council, and then at that time we would vote on it. But this gives them the freedom to go further into exploring this and looking at what a working group on specifically art in public spaces. And that's why I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have our Christmas tree lighting up here. And as usually is the case, I defer to Ms. Gurry, who's on this list, and she gets to go first.
I'll actually defer to Mr. Rudolph to speak first, and then if I could speak after him, if he...
No, it's Rowett is the last name.
Thank you, Chair. I'm thinking we've got kind of two spheres of topics going on. One is the big picture about what are we doing in terms of adhering to some framework that we all are comfortable with on our committees and that type of thing. This could be couched then as an interim I mean, and actually, we're going to talk later on about the timing of our opportunities to have a GPC Governance Priorities Committee on the subject of committees, which may not be till after Christmas, is the way I understand that, though it could come sooner if council feels that. So in the interim, there's an opportunity to proceed with something that gives us traction and an opportunity, and it could ultimately be considered a pilot or something that would then nest under the committee format that you choose, and so it may be part of the consideration that anybody that participates in that, including staff, have that understanding this is all subject to change in 2021. So it's just you kind of could do both. You could move it along, or you could park it until you do get into that committee discussion, which probably won't be till January, which then will take some time. So it's a few months out.
Thank you. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. A quick question to Ms. Bevan. The working group, do you imagine it will have public participation on it? I'm sorry, my computer's died, so I can't go back to the report. If it passes and you create a working group, will it include anyone other than staff and council?
Yes, that would be the main purpose, to have such a group so that we can get that kind of community input in our discussions.
Right, thank you. And to that point, then I would suggest that in terms of art, we want artists guiding us through that process. You know, I was thinking, Councillor Thorpe, to your comment, and I'm wondering if Bill Sims came to us and said, I need a working group on crosswalk safety, how would we feel? And I think my response to that would be, we have all of that, or we have the vast majority of that knowledge in-house. So I don't know if that's an appropriate public working group. But with art, I actually think it's quite different. Sorry, my notes are all a jumble. So that's my piece. And I also want to say, because I think it's been missed, and like Councillor Geselbrock, that the concerts at the care homes really touched me. I have grandparents in care homes, and I can imagine how much they would love that. So just my compliments to Ms. Dirksen for pivoting and doing that quickly and well. I'm a big fan of the concerts in the park. My family uses them a lot, and this is just a really nice transition during COVID. So thank you for that. That's it, a jumble.
Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I don't mean to minimize the concerns of Councillors Armstrong and Thorpe in this, but to me this is akin to being worried about the cost of the church and the hall for the marriage when all we're really being asked to do is engage in a first date. This is very early in the process, and staff are simply really asking us, are we prepared to go down this road some way, and I think we should. I think given the expertise that has been demonstrated over many years, and with Ms. Bevan's leadership, we'll certainly get back, I think, an appreciation and response to the concerns that have been raised by all members of council. So I'm certainly going to support this. Let's take the first step.
Thank you. Councillor Harding.
Yeah, sorry, just not to complicate it, but just want to make sure the clarification. It's already council's policy that for any permanent public art selection that a committee gets formed anyway. What Ms. Bevan's mentioned here is that rather than doing those one-off every time we do a permanent art, is come back to us some options of having more of a permanent public art group rather than always going back out to each one when we do. Because we're doing more public art tenders and for permanent public art. So that's, again, we're already doing that. This actually formalizes a little bit more, if that helps.
Thank you. No other speakers? I will call the question. All those in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? None. Well, that was impressive. You're not off the hook yet, sorry. We have a little more time here according to Mr. Harding's schedule. I do have some questions though on 4A. That's the, both Councillor Hemmons and myself were on that working group for the art. An awful lot of artists on that group, probably not enough just regular folks. But out of that, we decided that I think we made a decision that $50,000 wasn't enough to put a public art piece down in McPhail Sutton Park, which leaves $50,000 still not used. I truly thank all the people that were participated on that group. I do remember that back in the beginning of this year, an email went around to all the folks on that group asking about the possibility of putting up a totem pole instead. And I do know that, and everybody seemed to be quite in favor of the idea. And I do know that the Nanaimo Aboriginal Center is working with Noel Brown right now I think it's Noel Brown, to actually create a totem. And I was wondering if there's a way for the city to partner some way with the work that they're doing to bring it to final stages. I know that the Nanaimo Aboriginal Center has some money available for it, but not all of it.
That's a conversation that we've had a little bit internally within our department. And certainly I think that we are very open in terms of collaboration. And I think it's a matter of getting all of the items lined up, everyone aligned to move forward. We might have a comment here from Mr. Harding.
He's on there a lot. You're up, sir.
Thank you. Yes, so one of the issues on this one, or the issues with the opportunities, is working with Nanaimo First Nations on this process. And so, those on the protocol committee know that we've had this on the agenda a few times. We just want to make sure we're going through whatever pass or procedures, ensuring SFN are part in front of this in support of what this project is. Once that is all approved and through, we'd be bringing something towards council and how we can participate if it gets to that point.
Yeah, thank you. I would just assume that was a given, right, going that process, but thank you for that. Anything else? We're now almost at 3, which brings us up to our next item. Yes, we have a building. Yes, we're building capacity and engagement, art and culture communities in Nanaimo.
So this is the final segment of our presentation on culture. I'm really delighted right now to introduce Sonnet Labbé, who is a nationally renowned poet, a songwriter, an activist, and an organizer, and a faculty member at VIU, who teaches creative writing, and she says that she strives to make her classroom a place where everyone can be heard and feel heard, and where we can support each other and still disagree. Initially, Sonnet was going to perform this brand new song for you from the stage of the Port Theatre, but she has kindly agreed to join us here today, and so this is Sonnet's creative response to Reimagine Nanaimo.
So this will pick up both me and the guitar? Okay. Hello, City Council, members of council. I'm not sure the right way to address you. Mayor Krogh, hello Zenny. Thanks, Julie, for inviting me to present today. Julie would know me as a poet and invited me to share my poetry, and I asked if I could do a song. You may know that it's a bit of I was going to say hellscape. I'm a poet. I don't really, not hellscape out there, but just like culturally, sometimes hard to say what you want to say out loud and then hear all the feedback and then not be like, ugh, tense about it. And I've had that experience with poetry, and it made me turn to songwriting to try to express some of the things that I want to say. And the local open mic community in Nanaimo has been like an incredible community to meet. the people at the Queens, at the Nanaimo Bar, at the Corner Lounge that's now closed. That community of people has helped me try to make a bit of a transition to putting chords underneath the poems. And so when I was thinking about this ask, I thought of the ask as, where do we want to think about Nanaimo going, right? And you may know, I don't know if some of you might know my work, but I write about race a lot. I write about gender stuff. I think about coloniality a lot. I think a lot about what it means to be Canadian on the various territories that we're on. So I thought about the time when I was deciding whether or not to come and take a job at VIU versus take a job at the University of Calgary, and some of the questions that I had, and thinking about the wanting to attract Black professionals. I'm very excited about the possibility of attracting a crowd of diverse young professionals. That would be my jam. So I wrote this thinking about a conversation that I might have, or that people might be having when they're considering coming to Nanaimo. BLM in this song is for Black Lives Matter. Do you all know jerk chicken? I hope some of you know jerk chicken. Okay. Old friend, so good to hear from you and to hear you might take a job here on the Mid-Island, doing taxes and filing reports on the prices of logs. You've been thinking of making a move for a while and leaving that big city life. And you're asking me, am I happy here? And if in Nanaimo a Black girl can thrive? Well, Nazanin, you're wondering, should you move to Nanaimo? You heard it's a proud redneck town. You want to know, will your boys be okay in the schools? And are there that many Black people around? Well, girl, the real estate's great. The air's amazing, even when it smells like the mill. And of course there's the mountains, the mild winters and summers on ocean and cedar-lined trails. But you cannot get a good jerk chicken to save your life. And when I went to the Queens for the reggae scene, all the dreadlock rastas was white. Now I've been okay here. I fell in love with a redneck or two, but I've been cussed out. Someone egged my house. So what are you gonna do? Nazanin, you're wondering, should you move to Nanaimo? Well, I for one could use you here, 'cause the world is on fire, and when people get tired, you know they want to share laughter, loving, and tears. Nazanin, this ain't Toronto. Nazanin, it ain't Calgary. Nazanin, it ain't even Nanaimo, if we're speaking Hulkaminum. Still a small town, in its self-perception, colonial vibe at its heart. But there was a BLM rally down at Swilana, so that's a hopeful start. And we listened to Black teens raise their voices against and jokes and bullying. And I found some fam at the Sunday Blues Jam who know why the blackbird sings. So Nazanin, ain't gonna lie, girls like you and me, few and far between. But with our 20/20 vision, Nanaimo's seeing, It's self-different, Nazanin. So, Nazanin, I hope you do it. I hope you move to Nanaimo. I hope you bring your beautiful black boys. I will pick you up at the ferry with a mask on, my friend. I'll be so overjoyed to see you in Nanaimo, Nazanin. Thanks.
Thank you, Sonnet. That was beautiful. Thanks for coming.
I'd like to thank Sonnet also for that lovely song. I think that's one of the first here for this one. I don't remember seeing a lot of music played here. We should have more, I think. Absolutely. And it takes a true artist to really see what a community is like and to be able to describe it to us in song. So very much appreciated. And I could quite tell you, your decision to come here is certainly Calgary's loss. So thank you.
Chair, I'm not sure if before we move into this next section that a 5-minute recess for washroom breaks or anything is in order. It's totally council's call. I just don't know if anybody wants to stretch their legs.
I'm going to read the room on this one. I'm going to say it's time for a break. afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call our meeting back to order. And I believe we're up to item 5E. We've done the song, right?
Leonard's voting Green, Leonard's voting Conservative. You're voting the rival party. I'm voting independent.
Pay no attention to those people in the gallery there. Thank you, Julie. If you'd like to carry on, thanks.
Okay, so we're in the final segment of our presentation on culture. In addition to the creative responses to Reimagine Nanaimo that we invited, we're also planning a series of strategic conversations with arts and culture communities on 5 key topics. So I just wanted to share that a little bit about that with you before our colleagues continue to speak about an update on Reimagine Nanaimo. So we've identified 5 key themes that we're exploring in depth over the next few weeks here. We've got 10 focus group sessions planned. And the first theme that we're looking at is around sustainability. So issues related to funding, skill, and resource sharing. And under each of these themes, we've articulated 4 guiding questions that we'll be taking out and putting to groups. The second theme is reconciliation and decolonization, looking at how to advance ethical changes in the arts and culture sector. We'll be looking at our people, how to grow and retain talent in Nanaimo. We'll be talking about spaces for culture and needs for the future, and collaboration, partnerships, and building community. So these key themes were generated from a cultural plan for a creative Nanaimo, and they were also informed by research and dialogue with community members, arts and culture leaders. And so the idea is that we'll be convening groups that include nonprofit arts and culture organizations, individual artists, sector volunteers, and those who operate arts-based businesses in Nanaimo to talk about how we can work better together and what actions the city can undertake to ensure that our community flourishes. So at this point, this is all that I wanted to really share with you on these strategic conversations and invite any questions that you may have before turning it over to the Reimagine team.
Thank you. Your Worship, you're first up.
Thank you very much, and I mean this with a bit of cheekiness too. One of the most overworked words that everybody throws around is sustainability. What the hell does that mean? And reconciliation, I think we all get. But I'm not sure what decolonization means in the context of what you're talking about here in terms of a theme. How do you see that playing out? What's the practical impact of that in terms of what isn't being done or is being done?
Was your question on decolonization and how we're looking at framing that?
Yeah.
I think that the question, we know that, based on the presentations we heard today from our partners, this is a topic that organizations are addressing in different ways. And so we're looking at the steps organizations are taking to transform their relationships and their ways of being and offering services to the community. We're also looking at issues related to public space and the kinds of stories that we tell in our shared spaces in Nanaimo. So those are some of the issues that will be part of that conversation in particular.
If I may, so if I can try and translate that into something that people listening can understand. I don't mean that again critically, but this transformation, etc. So are we talking about more art that reflects the communities that existed here before colonization? In other words, making it more part. I mean, right now, there's a great deal of controversy around statues of old dead white guys and Judge Begbie and the Prime Minister, et cetera, and that's what I'm getting at. What does that look like in terms of its actual impact and I would argue improvement for the community? In other words, where does the rubber hit the road and what does that mean when we talk about the relationships Is it being sensitive and acknowledging a history that hasn't been taught or is largely unknown? Is it about public spaces that reflect a different focus? Is it about public art that speaks to the culture that existed here for thousands of years? How does that sort of play out?
I think in all the ways that you just described.
So maybe I do get it.
But I would say also that rather than, it's not exclusively a question of adding diverse artists to our art programs. It's looking at the ways we need to transform our programs and our ways of operating in the arts and culture community. So rather than creating a seat for an additional person at the table, looking at the actual construction of the table. And thinking about how the stories we tell in our public spaces share, often a mainstream story that many of us are familiar with, but leave out many other important key narratives. So finding ways to make space, our space wider and the conversation wider.
If I may speak to that as well, I'm quite a fan of superhero movies and stuff like that, and one of my favorites is Black Panther, and not so much because of the movie or about it, is the culture that exists in the movie as if colonialism never happened. And so, to me, the way to look to the future is if colonialism never happened here, what would our world look like? And with the idea of kind of moving down that road of what would the buildings look like? What would the roads look like? What would things look like if colonialism never happened, but people were able to advance through civilization without it? So that's kind of what I look to that is having that vision is how would things look if colonialism never showed up, sort of thing. So that's what I'd be shooting for, if that doesn't confuse the heck out of it. See the movie, you'll see.
And if I may just add to that, this is a conversation that we know many people across the community, in arts and culture in particular, are actively engaging in every day. And so we know that we're not necessarily leading the conversation. We're inviting people to join us for listening, and that would be a central role. And look at what is the role that the city needs to play in providing support for some of these activities.
Councillor Gesselbach.
Thank you, Director Bonner. I really appreciate Mayor Krog's question about what does decolonization mean, because I think that's a very important word that we should all be very familiar with and understand what it does mean. And I think it's quite a complex word and very tricky in understanding exactly what it is. But I think that it's to all our benefit to really get into it and be able to express and share that with the community as well. So just did a quick search online what decolonization means, and there's actually a lovely article done by the CBC on it that helps sort of build a bit more of an understanding around it. So thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I think there is nothing we have to vote on in this one, right? Just moving on. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next up is item E2. I put my glasses on. There we are. To be introduced by Dale Lindsay.
Good evening, or sorry, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Council. I'm going to be very, very brief because I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Bull-Pulsing immediately here, who's going to give you an update on Reimagine Nanaimo, and specifically the engagement work that's been done in the last few weeks, couple of months, and where we're heading from here. So an engagement status update, Ms. Bull-Pulsing.
Good afternoon, Council and Reimagine Steering Committee, because that's what you are, the GPC today. So I'd like to start off by first taking us through, for the benefit of some of our audience who may not or may be looking at this for the first time, just giving a quick overview before I go into what we've done in phase one on what Reimagine is. So basically, Reimagine, as you know, is an integrated, innovative way of looking at engagement for 6+ strategic plans. Our official community plan, Parks, Recreation, Culture, Master Plan update. You've heard from our arts and culture team today, the importance of that within this process. Active Transportation Plan, Climate Action Plan, Economic Development Plan, and Water Supply Strategic Plan. And with that, I will again say that I get to stand before you, but behind me is a team of people across all departments who are making the work that I'm about to tell you about happen. So I won't list them all because I'm bound to forget somebody's name, but you'd see some of them in the audience behind us. So we are in phase one. I'm giving you an update, middle of phase one of our engagement, which is gathering ideas. It goes without saying, we've had to adapt to COVID and quickly adjust our approach to engagement. And one of the key things we've had to do is focus a lot more on some of the online pieces, and I'm going to then tell you about what we're doing for non-online options. So we've had a series of different questionnaires. They're all still open. We encourage everybody to still go back, although we had weekly topics. All of the questionnaires above are still open. So we have one main questionnaire on Reimagine, and then focused ones for people who are interested in particular topic areas, whether it's in how we care, inclusivity and accessibility, how we work, the economy and jobs, climate change, etc. So the key to our phase one is really trying to make sure that we are looking at engaging in a way where everyone has a voice. We know as planners it's always hard to reach certain age groups, target groups, people with different barriers to engaging. And so that is one key area where we're really trying to see if we can make a difference, even in the current situation we're in with COVID. So our main platform we've been using is Get Involved Nanaimo, which is using a system called Bang the Table. This includes a whole host of information, so as much or as little as a person would care to look at. We have a variety of different options. So questionnaires, videos, you've all been part of those videos, thank you very much. We have kids' activity books, and we have new content and themes being added weekly. We also have, you'll see in a little bit, things like mapping, where people can add on a map what their ideas are for the city. So where are we at with our engagement? So I'm going to actually give you an update, because with our reports, you get things 2 weeks ahead of time. And of key, I'd like to point out, so on September 18th, we had 700 people who participated in the surveys online. Now, some of them did more than one survey. Some of them did actually all of the surveys. Now that number is 928. Now, this may seem like a modest number compared to the number of people in Nanaimo who have the capacity, based on their age and access to computers. We're looking at a target of ideally 1,500 minimum. Of course, as staff, we'd love to see more. And we understand from some of our communications team that even 500 is a good response during this time. So right now we're at 928. And we are seeing this number grow as people are becoming more and more aware of the Reimagine brand. They're paying attention to the radio ads. They're seeing the images in stores, who are displaying them on their window fronts, and also in our parks on the chalk spray. And also through all of the efforts, word of mouth, that's going on through our stakeholders and through the work you're doing. So all of these actions with social media make a big difference in terms of getting the information out there. We're seeing people comment on Reimagine through Facebook, responding to Twitter and other forms of Instagram as well. And this is a really key one. And I have to give, or we have to give, a huge raising of our hands to the Parks, Recreation, Culture Department, who managed to help coordinate across all departments doing 31 pop-up stations, and several of you participated in them. This was a huge effort during COVID to actually get out in the community. One of the things we saw over the summer was our parks were really well used. Unlike other countries or part of the world, we were still allowed to go out in our parks, and these pop-up tents were an important way of raising awareness. And we had staff, over 30 staff from all departments helped staff these pop-ups. So kudos to our Parks, Recreation, and Culture and all the staff who then went and yourselves who did this, because we think this was a major way of making people aware of the project and getting them interested in participating further.
I think Councillor Thorpe has a question.
And I'm really sorry to interrupt, but if we could just go back to that previous slide, I wanted to ask, will there be more pop-up stations as we move ahead, Ms. Bopelsing?
We are considering and looking at whether we could do some in locations indoors, given COVID, potentially some of the malls. At this point during the rest of phase one, we're really focusing on stakeholder engagement with key groups. And then in phase two, we would be back out again with the community with options. So as yet, I don't have any pop-ups scheduled between now and the end of October, because we're focusing on the smaller stakeholder group outreach with our team.
All right, thank you. And I just wanted to comment what an intelligent and attractive woman that is standing in front of the table there at that station.
I sure hope you're related to her.
I thought I better say that. Yeah.
Please, go ahead. He's done.
And there's
Oh,
a
sorry,
familiar-looking gentleman behind the counter too, actually.
We have, Councillor Gesselbrack also has it.
Well, actually, the woman in front of me was complaining to me about her husband.
I heard about it when she got home.
Okay, I don't know which questionnaire she gave feedback in. So was that feedback on how we care or how we live? Okay. Okay. So one of the key ways we're looking at, we're trying to use a social capital way of getting information out. So social media is great, but social capital is the work every single one of us does in community when we talk about something we know and people trust us. So our challenge to every staff person and every one of you in this room is if you can speak to 10 people about this project, you expand our reach, because people will listen to you personally more than a staff person they don't know. So we're using that network type theory. The other one based on this is using community representatives. So we held on August 18th and 25th opportunities for people who are interested in leading conversations in their neighborhoods or having us or with their groups or having us help facilitate, for example, the Nanaimo Brain Injury Society or some of those other nonprofits who have clients participate in conversations where they can help facilitate setting up Zoom meetings or other meetings where we can safely engage, or they can run and get feedback for us. So that's the community welcome meetings that you see there, and we're still giving out packages weekly to different groups. Then in terms of other stakeholder outreach, you can see that we've also, through our consultants, they have engaged and hired VIU students whose job it is to tap into the university community as well as the wider community, to both staff and faculty, to engage on Reimagine. School District 68, again, they've been quite challenged with COVID, but they have all the materials that we provided them to engage with students, and we are looking forward to opportunities, we hope quite soon, to get into classrooms where teachers would like us to zoom in or participate. And then another key area is groups that traditionally have barriers to participation. And so we want to give a raise of our hands to Literacy Nanaimo, who are helping us make sure that our materials are accessible. We also know that our work with the Multicultural Society, they've been using Reimagine through some of their ESL classes. So all of these pieces help us engage people who, for whom language or other access may be barriers. We're also looking at using the engagement we've done through the Health and Housing Task Force with different groups and making sure we use that in Reimagine. So people's voices also come in that way. And some of you are also aware of the Food Security Working Group and some of the work done through that. And there'll be some work that we hope Council will endorse us using in Reimagine through those efforts. So this is an example of some of the stakeholder and outreach response. Another creative way of getting people's engagement during COVID was to encourage and invite people to write in chalk in response to some of those chalk spray painted questions that you see at Departure Bay, Swilana, and different walkways around town, and even outside the Sark building. And there's here a series of images related to that on our social media pages. We're also in the process of having a statistically valid survey out in the community. 2,000 were mailed out with a return deadline of October 30th. Now, we did this prior to knowing that an election would be called. This might work in our advantage or not. It looks official enough that people might think it's a survey and a census. But the message to everyone is, if you think voting is important, this is important. This is a way of letting our community and our council know what your thoughts are in depth about things that will influence how your tax dollars are spent for the next 20, 25 years. So that's our message as staff to people regarding the online survey and the statistically valid. Now, the survey return target is 500, and one of the questions we had from Councillor Armstrong with the Accessibility and Inclusion Committee was, how will we make sure if some parts of our city have a lower response rate? So our survey consultant has an extra 300 surveys set aside, and if we see a lower response rate in certain neighborhoods based on their postal codes, we will send out those extra surveys to try and make sure that we get a more representative sample across the city. We know through our engineering department and also Parks, Rec and Culture that statistically valid surveys really do matter in this type of work. So they're a nice balance against the other types of input that we are collecting. We have the Creative Community Contest. This goes very nicely. You've seen Sonnet with her take on Reimagine Nanaimo. The contest is open until the end of October, and we really encourage all of the artists, budding artists, want-to-be artists, anybody to take the time to engage and submit different ways of their interpretation on, it could be a sculpture, it could be written, it could be song, it could be video. There's a whole host of ways people can submit to this contest. These are some of the branding materials, and what's nice is now people are actually starting to say, oh yes, I've seen that, what's that about? And that's the whole piece for the next 2 years as we go through this process. We're in this awareness phase and doing our best, and again, Parks, Rec and Culture seem to have the winning kind of streak in terms of they're out in our community the most, but they've looked at so many ways, putting information up in the rec centers, and also you'll see Bevan Park, the signage there. So again, we've used traditional advertising, and hopefully, I'm not sure if I might need your help, Jessica. Thank you. And this is the wave. Now we've noticed that we've seen an increase in the survey responses since doing these ads. So we're going to play one of them for you right now.
What kind of city will Nanaimo be in 20 years? Help us shape our community. Subscribe to the Reimagine Nanaimo project. Fill out questionnaires, submit designs for the creative contest, and enter to win prizes. Go to www.getinvolvednanaimo.ca today.
Okay, thank you. Oh, beg your pardon?
Prizes.
Yes, that's right. That's right. And in terms of coverage, we are hoping that you'll take every opportunity. I know our communications department, we've had one of the radio, I don't know if they're called disc jockeys, but one of the talk hosts from Chile Radio would like to interview members of council to talk about where you see yourself with Reimagine, maybe theme with some of the videos that you've done. And it's also been picked up in the Times Colonist. And so any opportunity we have for coverage that helps us boost both awareness and people's participation. So this is the last slide I have here. So what I would like to do is just thank everybody to date. I think with COVID, one of the things I personally have to do is temper my expectations and sometimes remember that we are in a different time. We didn't have the opportunities that we thought with Canada Day and some of the bigger events that we wanted to get out on. That being said, I think that we're doing quite well with where we're at, given that we have a community that is saturated online, despite being cooped up. People are getting out. And so we're hoping that as school settles in the next few weeks, big push to see if we can get our numbers up for the surveys and participation before phase 1 is complete. And the big thing too is to remember that engagement carries on throughout this process. And what becomes really important is when we have the ideas that have come in and all the background technical research, and then we start looking at, okay, what are the different options for our city? And getting people to give feedback on them in phase 2. So even if people say, you know what, I don't have time to give you input, I'm interested, but really I want to see what you come up with as choices, that is still to come. So with that, if you've got any questions or comments or feedback for us.
Anybody? Councillor Hemmons, nice try, your second.
Thank you, Chair. I've visited the link and explored all of the options to engage, and I just want to commend the whole staff. This is a really big project and a huge undertaking, and there's clearly a lot of horsepower behind it, so acknowledging that. One comment about engagement and then a specific question. So just going back to Councillor Armstrong's point about we all campaigned on community engagement, I think personally I'm seeing this as our huge opportunity, and I just want to do whatever I can to convince all of my colleagues at the table. We do have social capital, and we should, I think, be using it to support this. This is what we're here for. One of the uptake from teachers, I'm curious, have you had any uptake of staff Zooming in? And because I have had teachers say, this is a great initiative, I'd like to get my class participating. So has that happened?
Mr. Schulberg.
I can't say is Chris.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Hemmons through
Dawn.
Thank you. Yes, we actually have been trying mightily to get different teachers involved throughout the summer. It was difficult though because they had much more, I think there was other things on people's mind, particularly with the new school year and that coming in. However, we have had a lot of luck actually with the community schools group, and we're going to be doing some work through them. I think we're likely to get some engagement, at least during phase 1 through that particular unit.
That's really good to hear. Thank you.
Your Worship, you know.
I just wanted to extend my thanks to just Ms. Bhopal Singh and everyone who's worked on this project, Mr. Lindsay Shop, the whole, all of city staff. I think it is starting to resonate with people, as Ms. Bhopal Singh commented on earlier, and people are starting to pay attention. And to do it in this particular time, unprecedented for, well, literally 100 years, is a really important and very difficult undertaking. And again, just thank you.
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Chair. Just further to Councillor Hemmons' points and Ms. Bhopal Singh, this is basically full stop engagement that council is doing right now. And if councillors could take the time, if they haven't already registered on Get Involved Nanaimo, which is our Bang the Table platform and what we're using for Reimagine Nanaimo, you don't need to have a social media account. You don't need to be on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can just go on the website and sign up and get involved and participate and have your voices on that site and involved in the project. It would be really appreciated.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Councillor Armstrong, yes.
No, thank you. Yeah, I do have a couple questions. you know, again, social media. There's been a lot of, you know, negative criticism towards how the survey has been done, that it's very biased. Has that been looked at?
What we've done is we've created alternatives where people can give feedback, and through Literacy Nanaimo, we'll be looking at doing something a little simpler. The main thing is that the survey is just one way of giving feedback. And if people want to write us an essay, if they want to literally comment on something in a different way, all those avenues are open to them. And so we would encourage people to submit their thoughts, as many have done, through other channels that we are looking at, including email or having a conversation with staff. For some people, you know, it's not their thing to type out reams on Facebook or social media. They want to have a conversation, ask questions. So, and then the other thing I'd like to also say is the committees that you have are an important part of us getting feedback. So being able to have access, the accessibility, the Advisory Committee on Accessibility and Inclusion, the Economic Development Committee, the Environment Committee, all of those committees have representation that are very important to this process and are helping guide this process. So you'll see myself and our team collectively across the departments continue to use those committees for feedback and guidance on different aspects of the plan. So I think that structure has been very helpful to us and gives us engagement in a broader representation than we would if we had one person representing, say, the Environmental Committee, for example. Now we have a whole committee that has diversity within it. So just wanted to mention
Yeah, and
that.
just wanted to say thank you very much. Your presentation to the committee was really excellent, and having participated in the booths, I think the staff is doing a great job, and I think that's actually where we're getting lots of really good feedback. And I think it's important that those that do have concerns about the survey realize that there's nothing wrong with sending an email to mayor and council or other alternative places, because I know the main thing I got was that everything we had on there, that's what everybody wants, but there was no way to see how do you get there, what are the costs associated. So that was what a lot of the stuff was, that, yeah, I'd like this, but how much is it going to cost? So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Before we go then, our next item would be our agenda planning, but since I've got the chair here, and I'd like to be a bit philosophical if I may. Today's meeting, I think, was kind of important on arts and culture and heritage in our society. Our city is an organism that's growing, and if you want to describe it, Mr. Sims responsible for the structures of our city, and Mr. Lindsay's responsible for the growth of our city. But it's the work that Ms. Bevan and the arts, culture, and heritage group of our city is doing is actually responsible for the soul of our city. And it's that soul that makes us different from every other city in BC and Canada who have just as good buildings as we do, just as good roads as we do. But it's the soul that's why people come to a city, because they like the arts and culture and heritage of the place. So as we go through our work with Reimagine Nanaimo, I would hope that we would look at that. And also as we go through our economic development work that we're doing, we also look at that as well, is how do we attract people we have good soul, basically. So that's my little pitch for today. And now we're on to agenda planning. Woohoo. Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Chair. So on your addendum were the updated pages for the agenda planning portion of today's agenda. And there was an error in the date for the upcoming meetings. It said, I think, December 9th on your original agenda. The actual Governance and Priorities Committee meeting is scheduled for December 14th. So on the final page of the addendum and your original agenda had upcoming GPC and special council topics, and it has an outline of what staff have prepared for coming. But on the previous page, I think it's page 6 of your addendum, and I'm not sure what it was on your original agenda, near the end, it shows a list of future GPC topics that council has made motions or discussed at these meetings having in the future. So I do note that there may be some missing that have come up lately. I believe, I'm not sure if Councillor Armstrong has a topic that she might want to add to this list. And just for you to look at the meetings ahead and the list of future topics and kind of plan out what you would like to see for the remainder of the year and if staff can accommodate that. So if we could just go ahead to the last page, I think, of the agenda, please. and one, yeah, the last page.
Future topics.
So October 5th is listed, that was today, so we're done that. So there's 4 more meetings. There's October 26th, November 9th, November 23rd, and December 14th. So staff have some topics planned, and based on this, as well as the list of future topics that we have, or anything else council may wish to see, if you could let us know, and we could try to accommodate that.
Councillor Gusselbrock.
Thank you, Chair. Through you to staff. One topic which is kind of related to the Reimagine process is sort of the phase 2 of our neighborhood association engagement talk. And I was just kind of curious where we're at with that and sort of how staff see that dovetailing into the Reimagine process, because I think it's definitely something of consideration.
Chair, through you to Councillor Gusselbrock, I'm just going to actually ask Mr. Lindsay to come up and maybe speak to some of these other items as well that we have planned, the community amenity contribution, short-term rentals, and speak to Councillor Gusselbrock's question there maybe about neighborhood associations in the part 2. I believe that was mostly put off because of COVID, but he might have some more.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Absolutely through to Councillor Gusselbrock on the first question. We were intending to go out and meet with the neighborhood network, I think just about the time that COVID hit. And it's too bad that Mr. Schulberg just left, because I believe he has something tentatively scheduled to get back out with them soon. So we're hoping to pick that process up. So we've left that item on the list and hope to get back to council this fall. So yes, important to have input from the neighborhood associations as we move through Reimagine. So we'd like to get some clarity on that topic. I can speak to the other ones if there's questions from council. I think council is aware that there's been a direction, I think it actually came from the previous council, about reviewing our community amenity contributions. So that work's been done. We just met last week with the industry to get some feedback and input on that. We want to bring that forward to council. Short-term rentals is actually something that came out of the housing strategy, identification that short-term rentals have an impact on affordable housing. So we want to bring forward that discussion for council. You're all well aware of the animal control bylaw and the process that we went through with the external review, and that would be bringing the actual bylaw forward itself for more specific review and discussion. So there's other comments that, or if any questions council has on.
Any further?
No, that's great. My other question was about the community amenity contribution policy, and it looks like we're having that discussion October 26th. Brilliant.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Are we able to make suggestions for adding something? I'm interested in getting the election signage to a meeting sooner than later, since we're a couple years out from election now. And if the council decides to make any changes, we should be letting the public know as soon as possible. So.
That is on the list, and so we are working on either an amendment to the bylaw, because right now what election signage is actually covered in 2 of our bylaws right now, and it's absent from the election bylaw, which is where I kind of wanted to aggregate it all into one. However, after doing some research and with the benefit of having Ms. Robertson here, who kind of specializes in how bylaws should complement and adhere to each other, we're probably going to go down a policy avenue instead. And so we are working on that, and signage is an issue for me as well, having to have had to be the chief election officer for some elections, especially when it comes to municipal elections. So I would like it cleared up for myself as well, if I'm so fortunate as to be the chief election officer next time.
Thank you.
Mr. Rudolph.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of topics that are not on the list that I anticipate will you'll want time to discuss through GPC. The results of the task forces, all 3 of them will be submitting, I think, this fall, their recommendations and reports, and you may want to unpack some of the findings in those respective submissions before Christmas, so I anticipate that that's coming, certainly on the health and housing. There may be a need to spend a fair amount of time on going through a fairly detailed set of recommendations. Similarly with the economic development and possibly the mayor's task force, not sure. The second theme is finance. And while we're going to adhere to our regular schedule of finance and audit and council meetings, there's possible that we're going to need some extra time through GPC days for finance-related topics as we get further into the budget process. So I'm just flagging those as they're bigger topics that are likely to come. In fact, I think the tentative schedule in early December or late November already has us trying to capitalize on a morning as well as an afternoon. So we're going to try to anticipate that as time that you'll want to protect as well as some of these smaller topics. And I think, I'm not sure if the committee structure was on there, so I think Councillor Thorpe is, it's come up again today, so maybe sooner than later is a better thing on that whole scope of things. At least even if we had a preliminary discussion on it, then that could help frame what we would come back to a more fulsome conversation perhaps after Christmas. So today I was hearing on that subject a desire to get a handle on the portfolio of arts, culture, and recreation pieces and how does that fit through this governance led. So I think we could probably fit some of this into one of these other days and just get a heads up on that and then kind of go away and do a bunch of work and then come back to you on that. So that's one idea. So just on the task forces and the budget, those are the things I just wanted to highlight, that those will probably get added in as we get going.
Thank you. Anybody else? I do have a question regarding October 26th, if I may. Those are some fairly big items. Near and dear to my heart are the first two. It's the third and fourth for that matter. So are we going to have enough time in our meeting to discuss all these? I'll probably have a billion questions.
Thank you, Chair. So normally tomorrow morning, we get together as staff and we discuss scheduling and timing and see what kind of time each one of these is going to need. So I would need to have further discussion with staff involved to see what time they're looking at needing. And as it's just a GPC day that day, we might look at extending the actual time of the meeting in order to cover all of those topics. So like Mr. Rudolph said, we're in a crunch to the fall end of the year and looking at trying to cover all of the topics that council wishes to speak about, but also the heavy budget schedule as well. So if there is any items, a motion from council to have committees be added as a future topic, or if other councillors wish to have a topic added, a motion would be preferred right now, and then that way it's not lost. Staff have it, it's recorded in the minutes, we can add it to the list, so we aren't just going by conversation type things. So if there's any specific items that you wish to discuss that aren't on the list, if you could raise those today would be helpful as well.
I think we just might have that. Councillor Armstrong.
I do want to echo what Councillor Bonner said about the sanitation, because from the latest report I just read, we have some serious significant issues, which will have a huge budgetary impact for us. So I really think we should really have a really in-depth review coming up before we even hit budget, because, you know, if I'm reading it right, we could have some significant issues.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I had raised the issue of committees, and I would appreciate having that discussion, but I think Council saw my email indicating that I felt we have other demands on staff time right now, Reimagine Nanaimo and the budget especially. So I'm prepared to defer that to a later date, but whenever there is time, I think it would be a valuable conversation. And it has come up again today. So I'll leave that with Ms. Gurry. I didn't realize a motion was necessary, but if so, I would move that we put our committee structure or a general discussion regarding committees on a future GPC meeting.
Second.
Today is a banner day. Councillor Thorpe has made a motion on the fly. I'd like everybody to notice that.
Now I can't support it.
It's seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, raise your hands. Any opposed? None. Congratulations,
Boy,
Councillor
oh
Thorpe.
boy, that's below the belt. That's,
I was disappointed when you said, well, we could just defer. I said, oh, no. I think we're done unless anything. Oh, yes, we have the correspondence is for, this is for, just for notice that we have correspondence in 6A. I hope everybody has read it.
yes.
And next we have procedural motion. We don't have any of those, so it's motion to adjourn. So, motion by Mayor Krog, seconded by Councilor Armstrong. All those in favor? Opposed? It's passed. Thanks very much.